but it kind of gave me the analogy, and I'm probably going to cut out in about 15 or 20 minutes. If you want to hang on, I'll just log back in after I get past Leroy is the name of the town. But I lose internet when I get to that town. So, but it's only for like 5 minutes and then it logs back in. So I guess that's like an interlude. But, driving in the fog kind of gave me this analogy in my mind of what it's like between before, like maybe 10, 15 years ago with my attention and my attention now. So if the car in this analogy are my thoughts or are my make-believe concerns, the things that I'm concerned about, the things that I'm giving my cognitive attention to, whether it's problems or, goals or whatever, it is that we're putting our focus on. But in this foggy scenario, that's what's most accessible. I can see the car, I can see the steering wheel, I can see the interior. And in this analogy, those would be all of the thoughts, all of the cognition, essentially, that's distracting us from what's outside the car. And when we first start this practice, looking outside of the car is almost like a fog. It's not so clear. And that's the atrophy of awareness. It's not so easy to see through the fog because we're not used to doing it. We're not even, I guess we're terrible drivers in this example, but we're not even used to looking out of the window, really. What the mind is most used to doing is focusing on its imaginary, issues, problems, goals, things that need to be fixed, things that we think we should be doing, that we need to do, that we think we want, desires, psychological time. That's the interior of the car that we're paying attention to most of the time. And when we first start this practice, looking outside of the car is like looking into 50-yard fog. I mean, I can do it, but it's not so easy to see, especially until things, get really close to me. Then it's easier to see. And that's kind of like you don't feel your stomach until it hurts, or you don't pay attention to the world around you until it's smacking you in the face. Now, if we flash forward 15 years, it's different. It's like I don't even have to look at the interior of the car if I don't want to. I can, in a very relaxed way, place my attention outside of the vehicle on the road or the trees or the sky breaking the horizon. If I'm a passenger in the car, then I can look out the side view mirror or the rear view mirror and just have a good time exploring. And so that's what my mind feels like now. It feels like that fog is gone. That not only is it something that I can do, but it's something that I desire. I prefer a drive that's clear. Actually, outside of the analogy, I don't mind this because it's actually kind of spooky and mystical. And I'm just hoping that there's not a 20-car pileup up ahead because I won't see it until it's 50 yards away. But other than that, it's actually pretty interesting. But inside of the analogy, I definitely prefer the clarity. Does that analogy make sense, Jerry or Jean or Shayna? I know Shayna's working now because she's back at work, but
yes, it does.
Yeah, I just made that up driving, but that's how it feels. Did that make sense, Jean? Might not be able to answer. And I don't know who's all here. So, there I can see.
To me, Gene's driving, so he may be coming.
Oh, Gene's driving too?
His
all right, for sure.
video looks frozen right now.
I understand. Yeah, I don't want him to talk if he's driving anyway. But Jerry, I have about 5 or 10 minutes until I hit that town, and I'm gonna cut out, but just bear with it, and I'll log back in. And then just as long as Shane is here to record, I'll still keep talking because this is for the podcast. But are there any questions that you have, Jerry? Is there anything that you want to talk about?
Thanks. No, not that I'm thinking of. I'm actually just kind of getting around. My sleep patterns are different here the last month or two with the winter months and environment. So I'm just getting my coffee and hanging out with you. You and who else is here?
Sweet. Hey, Shayna, do you want to just tell in group chat that the room is open, so if somebody wanted to join, they know that we're doing it?
Yeah, I can do that real quick.
But otherwise, Jerry, I'm just going to stick to our basic topic, I guess, and some of the things that we've been discussing this week. So this week, we're going to be talking about the general nature of attention. And I think it's a great starting point for T, the transcendental embodiment approach. I think it's a great starting point because everything we're doing involves awareness and, well, really attention. Attention and awareness aren't all that far off, but for the minds of many, that there's a huge gulf between them. It's like an ocean between consciousness and awareness and attention. But ultimately, the nature of attention is going to be essential to grasp the T practice. To do anything with the T practice, we have to know what we're doing, and that is directing attention. So that's why this week, we're beginning the basics of T. It would begin with the basics of attention and, how attention moves and what kind of role attention plays in our life. So, and then maybe on the ride home, I'll talk more about hydrostasy. I can talk about how the habits and things that I've accumulated through my life, they're just falling away naturally. The desire that I have for myself and my life experience, it's just in this type of synchronistic flow where everything, it's not always meeting my desire necessarily in that moment, but there's just a lot of balance occurring. So I could talk about that on the ride home. Hey, there's Carly. So we got a couple people here now. Oh, do we have another window? Oh, all right. So we got Lisa. Hey guys, can you hear me? I'm just assuming.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Hi, Lisa. I'm driving to work. I will cut out here in about 10 minutes, but just stay with me and I'll just log back in because it's only for like 5 minutes. I guess the town of Leroy doesn't have internet. I don't know. But so this week we're just going to talk mostly. So most of my podcasts, I guess, we're just going to keep it on topic for the week, and we'll just talk about the general nature of attention. I think Shayna recommended that maybe some of the podcasts will share a little bit more of my specific experience, where I talk a little bit more about my past, and then maybe on the ride home I'll talk a little bit more about where my mind is now. How the landscape of my mind has changed, which results in the landscape of my entire life experience changing. So if we stick to the nature of attention, and I've told this story before, and then I'd love to hear your reflection. Maybe you have one too. But I used to have a lot of social anxiety. And I can look back on my life and see where it came from. I can look at my personal history and I can see the three destroyers of unconscious habit, biological habit, and the habits that I've created already. I can see the three destroyers at play. I can see them working in my life experience. And so I know where it's all coming from. I don't need to run out into the front lawn and drop on my knees and ask God, why is this happening to me? I see clearly where these attachments and things have come from. So I can see where the nature of my social anxiety that I had, I know where it came from. It's not a big mystery to me. But the key is that I don't feel that anymore. Even the objects of my attachment have been presented to me and I didn't respond to them in the same way that I used to. So I know that even when introduced to that stimuli, my mind is different and the anxiety no longer exists. But I used to constantly think about what other people were thinking about. I was constantly judging myself. And I had the multiplicity of self, the person that I thought that I wanted to be, the person that I thought I was projecting. I would look into the minds of other people and try to look through their eyes at what I was what I look like. Like what I look like through their eyes, through my mind, is just a vicious, deep trap. It is not beneficial. Does that make sense? Looking through the eyes of other people to how are they viewing me? Isn't that a weird thing to do? Does that make sense, Jerry? I might pick on you because I know that you're able to respond. I can't look at chat, so.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put it in chat, but yes, that makes
No,
sense.
you're good.
Yeah.
So I would walk out of the house, and the moment that I walked outside, I would instantly start evaluating, how am I walking? How do I look? You know, how am I going to present myself today? What kind of jokes am I going to tell? Who am I going to try to impress? I would even wake up and instantly launch into this thinking about what other people are thinking about. And it wasn't just that, but I think that was predominant. It was definitely creating a type of social anxiety and just a general anxiety at times. I was just constantly anxious about the future. Is that familiar to anyone else? There was depression mixed in there too, but that came more from stagnicity.
I wasn't in this place where I could reply.
Okay.
But I had a question when you were talking about you knew where it came from.
Sure.
And I was just right then I just had a thought, a question. Did it help you knowing that you knew? Did it matter?
No, it doesn't matter. Knowing where it comes from, the story of where it comes from, the principles are there. Even the principles of suffering. As long as I know the principles, the specificity of the story is not important. I know where the suffering came from and I know what to do with it. So again, it just comes back to the nature of attention. That's the only important factor, really. So no, knowing where it came from, knowing the personal history of it, it can be beneficial to share to you because that's experience and that can lend towards knowledge. But ultimately, for me, no, I don't need to know where it came from to be able to be directly and dissolve it.
Yeah, probably not you, but to a new student or somebody who's unfamiliar with what we're doing or just starting to gain some personal awareness. I was just asking because I know this has came up in class before where you've always said, you know, I don't know. I just was wondering if that was.
No, it's a good question. You know, I could see the beginner mind wanting to know this and thinking that it's important. So I guess that's one reason why we start with the nature of attention and we don't just launch straight into T practices. You know, we didn't start with box walking. We didn't start with 4 modes practice. We didn't start with we won't start with the rule of 3 and stuff like that. But maybe one of the reasons that we don't start with that is we do talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts, the philosophy. So Jerry, I could see the beginner mind wanting to know that, and I could see the beginner mind thinking that it's important, and I'm okay with that. But ultimately, I think we can all agree that that is just another intellectual exercise. It is just the first ring, if we're talking about it in terms of the ring of power. Wondering where the suffering comes from is, again, just the first ring. We're not engaging the second ring. Does that make sense? But I can understand why a beginner would be interested in that. They think that there's this one sentence or that they need to think about it or that they need to in words understand things. So I can understand the beginner mind thinking that that's important. Yes.
And then I know you've always said, you know, over the years, just start right where you are. You know, it's that questioning and one. Well, no, but I mean, it's that questioning, trying to figure things out that we don't need to do. Just start your practice.
Ultimately, yeah, you know, but that's why we're starting with the nature of attention and we're talking about that is because people aren't going to do it if we don't understand the mechanics of it. Very likely a person is not just going to go do this practice without some mechanics, understanding attention, the golden mean principle of balance, what happens when we're existing in an extreme, and how by maintaining attention, you know, we can find balance in our life experience. But yeah, a little background is necessary, but in terms of specifically going into each person's past, oh hell no. Like there'll be none of that. At least I'm not going to do that. If a person wants to go to psychotherapy and, they want a therapist to help them regress into their personal history, that's their choice. But that's definitely not what we'll be doing here. Is that helpful, Jerry? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, just you talking about it a few minutes ago just reminded me of that topic as it's came up over the years.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I would say if I'm looking at the nature of attention and this practice, it really was when Shana and I went to Starved Rock. So we went to Starved Rock to go hiking, and I've told this story before, but I'll discuss it again, and then you guys can let me know if you have questions. But for whatever reason, my mind was more relaxed. The objects of my attachment must have been giving me the attention that I wanted at that time because I wasn't anxious about it. Does that make sense? So have you ever had those moments where artificial circumstances, everything is working out at the moment, so there's not a lot of frustration at that moment? Does that make sense? Have you experienced that as well? Anybody can answer it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was having one of those days, and we were going hiking. So I just expected it to be a really great day. And it wasn't a bad day, but my mind continued to go back towards thought. So even though I was in a beautiful forest and I was with, people that I enjoy being around, I had no objects of anxiety necessarily. There was no frustration that was overt in my experience. The car didn't break down. I wasn't in physical pain. So there were no fires to put out at that exact moment, but I still didn't feel peace. I still didn't feel the relaxation that I wanted to feel because my mind was still thinking. It was still going like a leaf at the mercy of the wind from one topic to another, to another, to another. Does that sound familiar?
Yes. Very much.
And so I might be approaching the town where I cut out. So see, the weird thing is if I cut out, I don't know it. I guess I could look down at my screen and I can see if I'm at least logged in, but that only takes a second to glance. So it was really on the ride home, and I guess every now and then we do look for these realizations, these aha moments, and I did have an aha moment, but still, the aha moment pointed
You're leaving us
to the
now. See you in
practice.
a bit.
It pointed. What's that, Jerry?
I said you're leaving us. See you in a bit. You started to rumble out like you
Oh, did
were.
it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
But
I'm probably. I sound better now.
Yeah, you sound normal now. I just thought you're getting to that place where you're gonna blink
Oh,
out.
I might be. Yeah, I might be. I'm reaching a town called Downs, and I bet they don't have internet. But it's only 5 minutes away from Bloomington, so then I'm back in internet. So I'll just hold off though. Can you hear me okay now? Jerry, tell me a story.
I will tell you a story. I am going into a thought process right now that went into, some self-indulgence and stuff. And I just caught myself saying, wow, Jerry, I'm really kind of surprising myself that I'm doing this because I make it a point my entire life, or definitely the last 5, 7, 8 years. I don't talk to anybody that's driving a car on their cell phone. I'm uncomfortable with it. The focus thing. And I just make it a point to say, hey, Rhonda, or whoever I'm talking to, catch you later, not when you're on your phone. And I'm sitting here in a podcast. But of course, it is your mind and your attention.
Well, and also, Jerry, do you think when you drive?
Pardon me?
Do you think when you drive?
Well, I would prefer not, but I know I do.
Right. I'm just thinking out loud. So talking is just thinking out loud. As long as I'm not interacting with my phone, I should be fine.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So this is just the same as thinking. I'm just thinking out loud.
Well, you know what Oprah says. This was about
No,
10
what did Oprah say?
Oh, it was when she still had her show. It was years ago. And when
Yeah,
cell phones were
I like
becoming
Oprah.
were becoming so prominent, they did
Yeah.
a study on talking on your cell phone in your car. And talking on your cell phone in your car is the equivalent of having about 2 drinks. Texting in your car is like
Oh
driving with
God.
4 drinks.
Yeah, and I bet at that time when they did that study, though, they didn't have hands-free technology, so they were still holding the phone up to their head, which
But
requires
but you
attention
know
as
what
well. Yeah.
but I'm gonna have
No,
to
I get what
like
you're saying.
yeah, I'm just gonna but isn't that what this class is? Directing our mind.
But,
You know,
it
so
is. Yeah, for
you're
sure.
probably more practiced, but I
Oh
do know
yeah,
yeah. So
yeah. I have
something
one.
about yeah,
Oh, go
there's
ahead.
just
Sorry.
no, I just was saying that there is something about, you know, talking on your phone in your car and you're driving.
Well,
It is using a part of your brain, but this is what class is about.
it is. Yeah, and no, you're right. It could certainly be a distraction, but it's not for me. The way that I'm engaging my attention right now, I'm all good. Like, and if I'm not all good, I will pause. Like, I'll take a moment. If I need to pay attention more, navigate traffic or something like that, then yeah, for sure, I'll take a timeout. I'm okay with that. Fear not, Jerry. We're all good.
That was my story. Yes, for story, and that was
No,
what
it's
was
a good
going
story.
on.
That's a good story. Yeah, and I think that got us through our blackout spot there too. So now, so I guess where I was in my little story is I had a day. It should have been peaceful. There was no fires to put out. There was no drama for me to indulge at that particular moment, but I still didn't feel peace. And the reason I didn't feel peace is because my mind was not quiet. It did not really ever relax. I was still in a constant stream of internal self talk. Does that make sense? And from the sounds of it, Jerry, you could relate to that experience. At least Jerry could. And I'm sure others who are listening, you can relate to that as well. But then I had an aha. Jerry, what do you think that aha was? Do you remember the story? What was my aha that day when I was driving? Or when I was I was actually riding home.
Oh crap.
That's okay if you don't know.
No, I veered off. There was a bird, and I started listening to the bird behind my ear. I missed
It's
part of the
Eric,
story.
it's time. No pressure.
Oh God.
Yeah,
Well, would you mind just sharing it again, just
yeah.
briefly?
And then Shayna, you can answer too if you know. I'm just curious. If you don't know, that's fine. But I was on the ride home from Starved Rock. I did not feel peace like I wanted to. And then I had a realization as to why not. Why did I not feel peace? I had a realization regarding the nature of my attention. What was that realization?
Leaf at the mercy of the wind. You weren't directing
Yes,
anything. It was owning you.
exactly. So, although, I mean, it was set up like for a peaceful experience, just like vacation, is a setup for a relaxation type of experience. Although everything had been set up, and for all accounts and purposes, I should have been very relaxed and peaceful. And I guess I was more relaxed than when I would be declaring war psychologically and basically indulging and engaging in all of those different thought formats so that create the anxiety. So I wasn't doing that. So I guess I felt better, but I still didn't feel peace. I still didn't feel the relaxation that I know is possible. And I had that realization. I wasn't doing anything with my attention. And I had been learning about tricks of attention and, deliberate mindfulness. And so I had been learning all of that, but I wasn't doing it. And it was that moment that I realized that I have to direct my attention all the time, not just sometimes. I have to embody this for it to work all the time. And I want peace all the time. I don't want peace just, 2 weeks out of the year when I go on vacation, or for 1 hour out of every day when I have a beer, or for 2 days out of every week on the weekend. No, fuck that. I want peace and joy and connection all of the time, because I get this one life experience as far as I know. So it's important for me to feel those things now. And that was the realization. I had that aha moment when I was driving home that day, that no amount of external circumstances will guarantee me peace. I have to direct my attention into the now moment on purpose, deliberately and intentionally. And I use the words tricks of attention in my mind because I was borrowing that from Don Juan and Carlos Castaneda. So in my mind, I was using the word attention, that I did not have deliberate attention on the moment happening now. And that's why I couldn't feel any peace. Well, I wouldn't say any, but it wasn't sustainable. It didn't feel as tangible or as elongated as I thought it should, or that I knew that it could. Does that make sense? And I've told that story before, but I don't tell it often. So.
And then the root cause is the thinking.
The root cause was all of the thinking. Well, the reason that I went to...
Thinking.
What's that?
The leaking power thinking, maybe, or...
Well, the key was that my attention was not deliberate. And so what happens when the attention isn't deliberate? We are more susceptible to the three destroyers. And the three destroyers is habitual. It's just the mind moving in its habitual pattern. And yeah, that involves a lot of thinking. My habit was a lot of thinking. So that thinking was creating the frustration. But the root of that thinking was the lack of deliberate attention. Does that make sense? Now, the reason that is, Jerry, is because you can't do both easily simultaneously. The mind isn't wired that way. It doesn't do both very well. It can do it a little bit. Does that make sense? Think thoughts and engage the present moment.
Yes.
I'm doing it right now, but just enough to drive. So does that make sense, Jerry? The root was the lack of deliberate attention.
Yes, it makes
which
total
led to the thinking.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
if we look at
comparing, the contrasting, the checking in.
Oh,
well,
God.
did I do that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I was, who knows what I was thinking about, right? Like it was just so much shit. Like I remember I was on the walk and I was just thinking about stuff. Like thinking about being hungry, thinking about, am I sweating? Thinking about, poison ivy, poison oak. I was just thinking about everything that you could think about, and I couldn't relax. But that's a habit that I've created already, which is one of the three destroyers. Any questions about that, or any feedback? Does that sound familiar?
I'm not trying to monopolize this, but right then, Jean had a question.
No, go ahead. I don't know who has it. I can't see.
Oh, right then, I didn't have my notes, and I don't know if I got it written down. The three destroyers again, would you mind just listing them?
Sure. There's a fourth sneaky one, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'll talk about that on the ride home. I'll make the ride home a little bit more of a juicier conversation, I guess. But so the three primary destroyers are biology, and we're talking about habit, biological habit. So looking at boobs all the time for me was a biological habit, a habit that comes from the nature of biology. Overeating, that's a habit. We create that habit of overeating, but you have to eat, don't you, Jerry? So it's a biological habit. Does that make sense? Interestingly, all three destroyers work together, but I'm separating them for the sake of discussion. So we have biological habit. That's the first destroyer. Does that make sense? Biological habit? And then I'll tell you the other two.
Yep, I'm writing.
Okay. And then the second destroyer is basically habit that comes from society. So I don't know, what are some of the things that are unique to our society? Watching TV. Well, watching TV is something that they didn't do 200 years ago. So that, and they might not, that might not be a habit that is in all countries all over the world. Just depends on their relationship to TV. But that could be an example of society influencing your habits. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So societal habit. And then the third destroyer are the habits that you have created already, whatever they may be. And when you are not deliberately engaging, when you are not engaging the third pillar, as we call it, or shining the light of your attention on the second ring of power, you're feeding those three destroyers. You are so much more susceptible to being manipulated by your own biology, by the world around you, and by the habits you've created already when your mind is unconscious. We're feeding the three destroyers without even knowing it because of our unconscious nature. When that's occurring, I'm hoping that with this group that's occurring less and less and less, but when that is occurring, we are feeding the atrophy of awareness, which feeds the three destroyers. Does that make sense, Jerry?
Wow. I know you said it before and I've heard it many times, but that just sunk in a whole new way this morning. Thank you.
Sweet. But yeah, so there is a sneaky fourth destroyer, but it is so ingrained into the fabric of the American lifestyle and the Western lifestyle that I reserve that one, and I talk about it a little bit later. But there is a fourth destroyer, and it's a sneaky son of a bitch, but it's there. Yeah, so that's the nature of attention. I guess that's a little backstory on basically where I realized the third pillar. I had and if Gene's still there, like the realization is cool, but there's something I have to do with that realization. It's not the realization alone that made any bit of difference, really. It was the practice. It was practicing deliberate attention. So this is an example of knowledge. So I have the information about attention, right, Jerry? We have the information. I've given you guys the information. I'm writing a book, and that's all information about attention. Can we agree? Or Shayna, are you there to agree?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Cool. So we have the information about our attention, and I had that information at the time too. So I kind of knew it, but I just wasn't practicing it. I wasn't embodying it. That's where it began at the movie theater for me. I began to practice it, and then at the restaurant I began to embody it. After the restaurant I began to teach it, and now at the dispensary I am embodying, embracing, and demonstrating in a manner of speaking. But so I had the information, and now I had the experience. And those are the two components of knowledge. Now I had the knowledge that I must be doing something with my mind on purpose, or I'm going to be feeding the atrophy of awareness and the destroyers. So that is information, that is a little bit of experience, and that is knowledge. And that's kind of what we talked about before. And is that enough? Is that all I need? There's this other factor that I call wisdom, and that is the expression of knowledge. So, and I'm just going to pick on you, Jerry, because you seem to be the most audible at the, I guess your circumstances right now allow you to be. Shayna's at work, so I know she can only chime in occasionally. But I have knowledge of attention. I have experience with attention. I have information and I have experience, so I have knowledge. Does that automatically equal wisdom?
No.
What's necessary? The action, the doing. I have to do it. I have to follow up. Otherwise, there's no wisdom. So look at cigarettes. I have the information that cigarettes will cause cancer. I know that it's on the package. It's like they're required to put that on the labeling. So that is information that I have in my brain. And I've actually seen people with lung cancer. They've shown pictures of people who they have to have the tracheotomy, what's that called? Tracheotomy? Where they,
Yeah,
they have
tracheotomy.
to, yeah, so they have to do that. So I have the experience. I've seen it. I haven't personally experienced it, so it's secondhand, but that can still be beneficial. I can still work with that. I don't have to touch the hot pan to know that it's hot. I can watch Jerry touch it and learn from her experience too. But there is the action step where knowledge is expressed unto wisdom. And that's the real key. So I have the knowledge that my attention is vital, and where it is the most important aspect of my entire experience. And I have the experience. I've experienced deliberate attention, so I know it. I've felt it. I've seen other people do it, but I still have to act on that to express the knowledge unto wisdom. So to express knowledge is wisdom, essentially.
Some of that right then, if I may say, it felt like a violation of the hawk, and we had some contrasting going there. I don't know if I need to contrast that to do my practice. The other
Um,
person, illness, I'm watching other
no, not
people.
necessarily, but we have to have some experience. Information isn't enough. Information is not going to be enough to apply unto wisdom necessarily, unless the information is includes some experience. Does that make sense, Jerry? You're never going to learn about a hot pan and touching a hot pan unless you at least have some information and experience. Otherwise, you're just going to walk up to a hot pan and touch it because you don't know that it burning red is an indication to not touch. You haven't learned that yet. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but right now in my practice, I'm steadfastly being more aware of where I might be contrasting violation of the hawk kind of behaviors. And I don't
Well,
need
so
to contrast with others. I just
you
do
don't.
my
No.
practice.
Yeah. So let's apply this, Jerry. You have the information of T, right? You have the information. You take notes.
Yes.
And you've done T before, right? So you have some experience with it. You know that you can do it. You know how it feels. So you have knowledge and experience, right?
Yes.
But if you don't do your practice, you're not expressing it unto wisdom.
And that's where I think if I were to answer your question again, I would say for me, it has felt like and become integrated through embodying the principles.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is just explaining the process that we are expressing wisdom when we're doing the practice. So driving home and having the realization was the experience and the information. But that's not enough. I have to do my practice. That's all I'm getting at, Jerry. I have to actually do the practice. It wasn't just the aha moment. That's not enough. There is an action step. I have to do it for it to have its effect. So I have to do the practice, and that is wisdom. When I'm doing the practice, when I'm acting on the information and the knowledge, that is wise. That is the definition of wisdom, how I use the word. Does that make sense, Jerry? So that, and you don't ever need to compare and contrast that to another person. That's that's all about you. That's about your mind.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed.
The good news though is that we can share experience and learn from other people's experiences. So if Lisa says, Ernest, if you touch a handle that's red hot, it's gonna hurt like a motherfucker. Don't do it. I'll be like, okay, thank you for that information and sharing your experience. Until I walk past that red handle and choose not to touch it because of Lisa's story, I have not expressed knowledge unto wisdom yet. But the moment I do, I was just very wise because I listened to the information and the experience, and now I have my own experience to go with that. Does that make sense, Jerry? So this isn't comparing and contrasting with other people's experiences, but it is how I use the word wisdom as an expression, not as some abstract, oh, you're so wise. I don't know. Are you being wise right now? Are you acting on the knowledge and the information that you've accumulated? Or has that just been put up into your neural, patterns to be accessed later? I would say that the latter is abstract and is not wisdom. Does that make sense?
it does make sense. And I'm not, my mind is very deliberate with where, as I'm listening to you, I know that for me to continue my practice, to stay in my practice, my story, my shit is enough. Like you were talking earlier about getting up in the,
Yeah, sure.
the first thing out of the day, you're wondering, well, what kind of joke should I come up with? What should I wear?
Right.
My own uneasiness is enough for me to have the desire for this practice. I don't need to compare it to anybody else.
Yeah, no, you don't have to.
My shit.
The good, yeah, no, we've experienced enough suffering. We can use our own suffering as a springboard for the experience part of knowledge and wisdom, for sure. I guess
And
I
that's,
was just giving you, yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
no, I just was going to say, and that's really why we're here, and that's really what we're doing.
Right.
Is I think our own ill at ease is enough. Is enough.
It is enough, but there still may be times where when we share our experience, that's beneficial for things that maybe you haven't experienced yet. So let's say you've never been on an airplane, Jerry, and Lisa has. And Lisa is like, these are the things that used to bother me. This is what I do now when I feel that. And now I'm not bothered anymore. And then, Jerry, you're about to get on an airplane and you start to feel the things that Lisa was talking about. And then you try Lisa's trick of attention, and now you benefit from Lisa's experience. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. You do have your own experiences to go on, and so you understand suffering intimately, but we can still share our experience and come together and learn from one another. I think that has value too, though.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm not saying anything against that. Yes, that's connection. That, yeah.
Exactly. And we can learn from each other's experiences to a certain extent, but we don't have to compare and contrast, because then we would be violating the perception of the hawk. You're right. And we haven't talked much about that, but Jerry, I know that and most of the folks here, we've talked about and there's a story behind perception of the hawk as well. There's a story behind everything. So I think that Shayna, your idea of sharing the experience of where I learned these things and how I began to apply them. And then maybe on the ride home, I'll talk more about how I'm applying them every day at work, how I'm applying them every day on the ride to work, how I'm applying them every day when I get home, how I'm applying my principles all day long, all throughout the day. And it doesn't make me a in air quotes perfect person, but I am constantly learning, and I am constantly feeling the splendor and the mystery and the joy and the loving connection of my life experience. It's not just on weekends. It's not just when I finally get home and I get that glass of beer. Nothing against a glass of beer when you get home. I every now and then I do a cannabis fast now, so I'm not consuming cannabis all day long, but it's actually kind of nice to get home and have that refreshing, but I'm not relying on that. It's not a crutch. I don't need it necessarily, unless I did, and then it's just a tool. But does all that make sense? So that's pretty much the nature of attention, where it came from, a little story behind it, and I hope that's beneficial. Is there any other comments that you guys would like to add? Lisa, Jerry, Shayna? I don't know who else is here. I'm parked now, so I can look. Oh, Jenny's here too. Sweet. Any last minute conversation points? Otherwise, I will post this up to the podcast. And Jerry, I know you don't mind, but just so everybody else knows, this is a podcast. So if you do talk, it is going to get uploaded. So, if you don't want your voice in it, then just listen. That's all good too.
So 45-minute drive to work and you're there. Awesome. Beautiful.
And I'm there. Yep. No, my drive to work has been splendid. The entire time that I have been driving, I have not felt resistance to it, to the act of driving. I drive home an hour after work, and I have never once felt resistance to the act of driving. I don't really like the gas money that it costs, but the physical act of driving, I mean, it's just like anything else. I can direct my attention and make it into a joyful, wonderful experience. And I do. All right. Well, I will see you guys. I'm off work at 5:30. So if you want to log in about 6 p.m. tonight, I'll be doing a drive home podcast. So if you want to, that might be too late for you, Lisa, in Euroland, but Jerry or Shayna for sure, because you need to start the meeting. But anybody else, you're welcome to attend, come hang out, and then we'll talk.
Thanks for taking us along. See you later.
All right. Yep. You're welcome. I'll see you guys later. Have a good day.